Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 471, featuring Chris MacLean, who's the overall VFX supervisor on Foundation, the series that is currently airing on Apple TV Plus. Super excited to have him on. Very, very ambitious show, as you know, by Apple TV, and having him be part of it is really, really cool. It's interesting. Chris and I probably have crossed paths many times. We've never actually met, but he was doing a lot of similar things that we were doing around the same time, which you will hear during the podcast, and we know a lot of the same people, which is kind of cool. He worked over at Mr. X for a number of years, and he did some really great stuff there, including Crimson Peak and Godless, American Gods, Resident Evil. And now, of course, he's the overall studio supervisor on Foundation. Very smart guy, very down to earth, which I really, really appreciate his candor on a lot of these great subjects. He's super busy these days, which is also good because he's also obviously very, very talented. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about the state of the visual effects industry. Obviously, there's been a lot of turmoil that's happened in this area, and he's sort of a really great person that made some great sense as to how things are going to change, especially in the things like AI tools, what that's going to do. We talk a lot about Gaussian splats and how we think that that's going to change things. Chris seems to think that we may not have polygons in the future, and he may have some good reason to think that as well. So it's really interesting to talk to him. So super glad we could get Chris on to the podcast and to talk about all these amazing things. Really, really great guy. Okay, in terms of announcements, I think product announcements, the only thing I really want to talk about is actually Project Arena, something that you guys know I have been very deeply involved with and I am very excited about. If you want to know more about Project Arena, just go to chaos.com/virtual-production, chaos.com/virtual-production. And you'll learn more about it there. A lot of people have asked, can I try Project Arena? Well, it doesn't really make any sense for people to try Project Arena unless you actually have an LED stage for it to try on, because essentially what it is just Vantage that has been created and optimized to work on an LED stage. So without an LED stage, you can't really do Project Arena, but you can do Vantage, and Vantage is essentially what Project Arena is. So if you want to know more about Project Arena, all you got to do is just try Vantage, and it's a great tool, and I highly, highly recommend it. I love it. I think it's really, really interesting to see full real-time ray tracing, especially with the right hardware. It is incredibly fast. And speaking of Vantage, there has been a new update recently, and I want to make sure you guys are aware of that. So Vantage 2 Update 3 is out. It includes several updates. One of the biggest ones is the new support for layered materials, which has been added recently, and that is a big deal. A lot of people have been asking about that, and we now have it working in Vantage. So now you have layered materials working in real-time ray tracing. Super exciting. We've also added a new multi-matte render element to Vantage. So if you need multi-mattes out of your render elements and in a Vantage render, you can get that. And we've done several other UX changes that I think will feel very beneficial. So again, just go to chaos.com to see all of that information about Vantage. In terms of events, just go to chaos.com/events for all news on our events. We do have another Chaos Unboxed event that is happening May 9th, and it's happening simultaneously in London and Madrid. So, and in our London event, actually, Nikos will be teaching another class on creative lighting. So that is really exciting. I highly recommend you guys check that out. If you'd like to take his class, it is really worth it. And all of this can be found again at chaos.com/events, where you can register for all of this. Now, if you want to know more about the podcast, you guys know the deal. Our podcast page is chaos.com/CG Garage. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast. And of course, we'd love recommendations on anyone who you'd like to have on the podcast, including this one, which was a recommendation. Just go to chaos, just email us, which is labs@chaos.com. Again, that is labs@chaos.com. But for now, please enjoy Chris MacLean.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
But Chris, I do want to know a little bit about your history. I know I was reading a little bit about your history, and I think it's pretty interesting, and your background and how you got into doing the things that you do. So I would love to know a little bit from your side of things, like what got you into doing the things that you do now? Like how is it you started? You started in Canada, is that correct?
Yeah, I started in Canada doing documentaries.
Oh, right.
Doing CG effects for like National Geographic and Discovery Channel documentaries, and then that dried up very quickly, and then ended up moving out to Toronto. Got hired by Mr. X. Was there for I think 12 years. I started as a junior modeler. Very quickly became an asset supervisor, and kind of worked my way up. CG supervisor, digital effects supervisor. I was there when we were doing Tron. I think.
Oh yeah.
You may have swung by the office when it was at 35 McCall.
Yep.
I was on a different show at the time. Everybody else was working on Tron, but I can't remember. I think it was on Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did all of the Mr. X stuff, and I hooked up with John Swallow on Godless. Did a couple shows with him before he passed, and then got the call from Michael Malone, who was my producer on The Highwaymen and Godless. Our line producer, and he had just been hired to do Foundation, and he said, I need a no BS VFX supervisor to come help me do the show. And it's actually the last conversation I had with John, because I was either going to work on Queen's Gambit, American Gods Season 3, or Foundation. And John was already in his his kind of hospice bed, and he said, I think his wife Lori was upstairs, and he had said, do whichever one scares you the most. And from upstairs, I heard Lori say, "It doesn't always have to be hard, John." And that was the last conversation I had with John. But I took the hard one, and I've been on the show for 5 years. So
that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. I definitely want to get into Foundation for obvious reasons, but I do want to know a little bit about what got you interested in visual effects. Like what was it about that process? I mean, did you like filmmaking? Was it the tinkering, the creating, the problem solving?
Well, I mean, I'd always been a kind of a traditional artist, and I had gotten into graphic design out of high school. Mm-hmm. And then my now wife and I took a holiday to Sicamous, Merrill Lake, and it rained the whole time. But I brought a PlayStation with me, and I think we were playing Metal Gear Solid, and I was like, maybe I could, take my skill set and figure out how to get into this kind of storytelling. And so I started exploring schools for game design and 3D animation and all of that. And then my wife was like, "Movies are cooler. You should do movies." And then I'm like, "Okay, all right, whatever. I'll because so I went to school in Edmonton, and that's where I actually picked up the gig for the Discovery Channel stuff,
right,
from a fellow named Michael Jorgensen. But it was just a love of storytelling and a love of digital art, I guess, which is a strange thing to say, but yeah, it was that's kind of how I got started was by playing Metal Gear Solid for hours on end in a rainy condo.
Right.
So
what part of it was the most interesting thing when you went to school? Obviously there's so many different ways that people get exposed to visual effects or CG in general. Is it the modeling, the creation, the lighting, the storytelling, the animation? Like, what was the thing that really sort of got you all into it?
It was the sculpting, it was the modeling, it was the problem solving. It was definitely when I eventually got into it and started actually doing it for real, working, it was, it seemed insurmountable a lot of the times. It seemed impossible. But, once you figured out the, best practices, best way to, whether it was topology or the best way to sculpt. I mean, when I started, I actually took, in high school, we were one of the first high schools to get 3D Studio Max in like 1999 or something like that. But then I had kind of shelved it and came back right around the time that ZBrush, I think 2.5 had come out, and started learning how to sculpt and do all that sort of stuff. But then also just really, because there was only two websites at the time. It was like Nauman and CG Talk, which is CG Society, which is debunked now. But those were the only places you could really go to find out how to do stuff. And so when I was in school for it, I was supplementing my education with Nauman and that CG Talk, and just kind of figuring out the best way to do things from all that. And then eventually, when I landed at Mr. X, that paid off because nobody knew what non-manifold geometry was, or knew that that could throw the render into a death spiral and things like that. So, valances are bad, that sort of stuff. Not as important anymore, but
Were you doing it with the Nauman workshop stuff that were the supplemental videos?
I still have a lot of DVDs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've got a library of DVDs, and I think the art of rigging books were very important as well, because it kind of opened up that side of it for me. Because I tinkered in every aspect of what we do, and it eventually led me to compositing and color and rendering and lighting and all of that stuff that that's a CG generalist kind of has to know. So
it was interesting because I actually had authored a couple of DVDs for Nauman at the time. I'd done some stuff on V-Ray, which was kind of a bit of a paradigm shift, because back then there was a lot of people had a certain way of thinking about how to do things, right? And so ray tracing, or complete ray tracing, was sort of a new concept of a thought process there. But the same thing was true for modeling, right? When you start thinking about ZBrush, it's a completely different way of thinking about modeling. Most of the education was like NURBS patches and weird things like that. It was just impossible to use. So you were right there at that shift, right? As you were thinking about.
I was right on the cusp. Like we were using RenderMan when Tron showed up at the studio, and DD had actually told us to, okay, you got to use V-Ray now. Right. And I remember doing that shift, and it was also because when I was doing a lot of my asset development, I was doing it in Maya in mental ray rendering with ray tracing, and getting a photorealistic render. Then we would pipe that over to Houdini and RenderMan. And because of the infrastructure of RenderMan, brick maps and occlusion maps, and it's all built for compositing, and you don't actually know what you're going to get until you get to compositing. And then they beat the crap out of the render passes in the comp, and they're like, can you render a few more lighting passes for us? And then it just, I think V-Ray, Arnold, RenderMan, RIS, all of that kind of changed the way that we can approach it like we do on set now. Yes. So, which is very nice. There's it's still difficult. There's still a little bit of the aesthetic that we lose from. It's like, we're very good at imitating the sensor and what's between the sensor and the CG, but the lens, we're still. That's where I spend most of my time kind of, massaging things, especially with people that, because we use a lot of anamorphic lenses and things like that. So, it's great. Motion blur is another big one. It's still something that you have to kind of really pay attention to. I think that's kind of like where ILM started. Right. Was painting in motion blur and dealing with that sort of stuff. So they're kind of the best at it. Everybody else is kind of still have trouble with it, but
I'm curious about that because I'm going to go a little technical sidetrack here because that concept of the lensing, right? Because it is actually technically possible to imitate lensing as a ray tracing very accurately. That's the nature of what a ray tracer does, but it's often asked not to do it because they want the flexibility of manipulating it in comp, which makes it like, so it's never going to quite look right because you have to do it in comp, right?
Yeah. And I it's, if we do it in comp, I mean, obviously there's lens distortion, but then there's also, every element inside of a lens changes the tone mapping of the lens. Yep. That's why we do all of our, color charts and stuff like that, but also the elements. Like right now, on this camera that I'm looking at you on, I have an old 58 mil radiated Canon lens on a Sony body. And that glass is, there's like, whatever it is, 8 elements in there that have all been like, the lens has been dropped 3 or 4 times. And, they've all been bounced around so that nothing is actually correct. And when you do that, like, for example, on season 1, we used a bunch of old Panavision lenses for the pilot on Foundation, and there was no way to replicate what they did. But mind you, DNEG did a really good job of replicating that. But we also did, with our lens grids, we also did a bokeh board where we ran through the focus of all the lenses and showed. Like we had LEDs that showed where the anamorphizer clipped the bokeh in the background, top and bottom, and we kind of built a gizmo for that, so that when we did that in comp, they could find that correctly and actually match what was shot, which was Chris Keller and the guys did a great job at that. So, but it's a difficult thing to do, and it's hard. It's hard for people who haven't used a camera. It's hard for people that, and I'm still finding that, or haven't been on set and seeing how the cameras work and what actually goes into filming something. Sure. It's not just one guy running around with a camera. There's 3 or 4 people involved. Oh shit! Yeah. And just in the camera side of the shot. If there's a crane, there's 3 more people. If there's a remote head, there's another person. Yep. And then there's a DIT, and there's all of that stuff that goes into filming something. So it's we're starting to get really good at it. It's we're getting to the point where we can do anything, and the question's becoming, should we? A lot of the time. So that's kind of nice. For sure. But did my video? Okay, I don't know. Did my video disappear? Oh yes. Hold on. I'll fix that in a second. Bars, I got bars. I'll fix that right away. Hold on a second. All good. Okay. But no, I mean, you're actually. I think did Ian Spriggs, right? Oh yeah, I know him very well. Yeah. He's him and I came up together a little bit at Mr. X. Oh, nice. Yeah, he had done, I think it was I can't remember what the advertisement magazine was, but he had done those covers. And we hired him, I think, for Three Musketeers or something. And the CG soup on that had him modeling a knife. And I was like, no, we should probably have him on characters. And then him and I became really good friends, and that's another thing that we like when again because I'm a little spastic when it comes to what I focus on. Sure. Him and I started to focus on anatomy, and that's where like we'd send each other. There was I can't remember what the gizmo was or the website was. It was like an old Flash game or something where you had to actually name parts of the body, and we would like send that to each other every morning. And but yeah, that was that was always another thing too. Was how far you had to become a pseudo expert in everything when it came to CG, and just kind of figure out as much as you could. Right. About everything that you had to do to complete a shot. Right. And that was but Ian being the specialist he was is now doing very well as the primo CG portrait guy. So
he is, and I think it's interesting that you just said that. I mean, because you know, like in the span of 5 minutes, you were talking about the intricacy of lenses, and then talking about anatomy, right? So those are two very different disciplines, and I think it's kind of enlightening to see that. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean it's, but that's over. I think I've been doing this now for 15 years, something like that. But over the span of that time, there's just so much stuff that I've had to focus on just to get the job done. That it's kind of, you go from anatomy to shaders to lighting to cameras to even Python and VOPs and LOPs and SOPs and all that stuff and Houdini, and it's it breaks your brain a little bit.
Sure.
And now we've got to deal with Gaussian splatting and all that stuff on the horizon. So it's becoming very, very exciting again.
Do you find Do you find that there is? I found it ironic in some cases that the visual effects industry sometimes has a resistance to change, even though they are excited to change. But there's like, well, we used to do it the old way, whatever. I remember for example, Alex Alvarez was like, we're still going to do all characters with NURBS. I was like, really, Alex? It was kind of it's interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think that the resistance to change is twofold. Artists know what they know and don't necessarily want to change. Mm-hmm. And the other one is when a pipeline is built around the house of cards, or in some cases the Taj Mahal of cards that some places have built around the duct tape that's holding everything together.
Sure.
To change something is starting from scratch, which is why smaller companies tend to be able to pivot to the new technologies faster, and you kind of get this leapfrog effect where a smaller company will do something better than a bigger company, or to figure out how to do it faster, just because they're able to maneuver outside of whatever they have built inside of their pipelines. So. But a lot of companies, have their skunk works teams that go out ahead and try to figure this stuff out, which is great too. But it is important, I think, that everybody kind of pays attention, especially with all the neural net and machine learning and all of the craziness with that's coming about now. So
yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts on this, because obviously you've seen some of these changes, and there's a way that for a long time, especially in those early 2000s, as we were talking about, where established pipelines were well established, right? And they were designated by tools, right? So it's like, everyone uses this specific tool for doing this specific task, and then the thing is that, the saying I always use, like when the only tool you know how to use a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, right? So, and so everything kind of looks the same because they're all tackled with the same tool. But what I think was interesting now is that it's not just the established, there's so many, there's probably like 5 since this morning tools of open source tools that have come out that are like, oh, this could change everything, right? And it's just this constant open source ideas, this constant idea of people trying to catch up to some new ideas. And even just in the realm of Gaussian splats, as you just mentioned, there's not one Gaussian, there's hundreds of Gaussian splat solutions out there. No one really knows which one's going to win, and no one seems to want to embrace one, because they know that whatever they embrace is going to be obsolete the next day. Like, how do we manage that sort of shift where it's turning so fast that it's hard to sort of change what we think?
Yeah, and I mean, it's like the old VHS and beta, conundrum. Eventually, one will win out, or the PlayStation and Xbox thing.
Right.
I think eventually we'll either pick one, or companies will just segregate again and have different versions that work. But it's like Alembic and USD, right? Alembic was fairly, it took a while, but everybody kind of caught on to that and started using it. USD has taken a lot longer and is now just kind of becoming a little more traditional, or not traditional. What's the word I'm looking for? A little more commonplace.
Standardized.
Standardized, yeah. But it's taken a long time. Like it's been around.
Well,
for,
it needs to include so much, right?
Yeah.
And we definitely needed something beyond FBX and Alembic that needed a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, with the Gaussian Splat stuff, you look at what you're able to, if you're able to get a clean version of that. I was talking to Mark from Houdini from Side Effects about this, and the data footprint for that is so small. If you figure out a way to, even if you're building a CG environment, that's 3 billion polygons converted to a Gaussian splat, and then use that as your lighting file, or figure out a way to use that as your lighting file. That would change everything again, because you're now able to push so much more data through the pipeline that much more quickly, and I think that's where to kind of be a little bit of a CG futurist about that. I think that's where this next step is going to take us, is doing that may actually become our new USD, or our new standards. New standard for lighting pass through.
Yeah, I think you're right. Polygons might not be definitely have much life left in some ways, but I was thinking about this maybe about 10 years ago, or maybe less than that, but with light fields, right? When everyone's talking about light fields, and I was like, okay, well, this is way too freaking heavy. But if we find some way of doing the definition of what a light field is in a much lighter process, then why would we need anything else, right? Yeah.
No, I know. I remember when, what was that giant camera?
Oh, Lytro.
Lytro. It was actually, they had the aperture one. They're the one that you could change the focal length on.
Yep, that was the little butter stick one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they built that giant cinema camera.
Huge.
And I remember...
I remember seeing it.
I know. It was like the computers in the 60s, and I was like, this is great that you can do all this, but can it move? Can you actually do a camera move with it? Will a cinematographer use this? And,
right.
I can't remember. I think, did Google buy them or something?
Yes, they did. Actually, Chaos was doing some work with them at some point a long time ago. But I mean, the fact is that light fields are fantastic, right? But there's enormous amount of redundant information that you get, because you've got 2,000 cameras that are 99% of what the other camera got. So it's a lot of redundancy. And so it was kind of interesting. All right, sorry, we don't need to geek out on that, but that's cool that you're thinking about these things a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about going on set and that transition, and like how that sort of happened. Obviously, being a studio person and getting on set, and how that sort of happened, and then how did that lead to you being on Foundation?
I was at the studio. I started going on set when you started scanning actors.
Right. As the asset guy.
As the asset guy, yeah. I spent some time there with a guy named Sean Mills. I think the first show I went on the set was Resident Evil. I think we were scanning with XYZ RGB out of Ottawa. I think they were from Ottawa. And just, learning that process. And then when photogrammetry came along, it was like, oh, okay, well, we can probably build one of these systems ourselves. So being the dummy I went home and tried to figure out how to build one of these systems. And we did, and we started using it. And it's got pretty good, but then we got Mr. X got bought by Technicolor right around the time I built that system. So it was there and we used it, but it never really developed much further than the 1.0 version of that. But we kept going on set, we kept using it, and then Crimson Peak was really the first show that I spent, more than a week on set for. And that was kind of eye-opening. And that's when I started realizing that, I was starting to make the connection between, why things get done the way they do and why things aren't always perfect, and why don't they take the time to get this, because
you have 5 minutes to make a decision.
5 minutes to make a decision. And $20,000 an hour or $30,000 an hour to shoot. And, it's you have to be as efficient as possible. So that became very interesting. So we got into a bit of data wrangling and HDR capture and things like that. And then, then it just became, Dennis Berardi, who ran Mr. X for a long time. He's now got a new company called Herney Hill Media. But, he sent me out. I started doing, kind of shadowing him a little bit and working with him. And then, eventually, I think he thought he was sending me out to the wolves a little bit when he sent me to meet John Swallow, because, John Swallow was known as a bit of a no bullshit type of guy. And because he ran Universal Visual Effects for 20 years. He was a crazy heavy hitter, and was trying to make his comeback as a supervisor after leaving that situation, and they needed me to go out as a representative for Mr. X on Godless. And so I went out, I met John. John and I got along great. Because neither one of us put up with much bullshit, which is great, and that's kind of why we got along. But we spent the day on the train talking about photography, because I'd already started getting into cameras and things like that. And he basically said, "Great, Chris is great, whatever." And then talking to Dennis at the end of the day, he's like, "Did he fire you?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Okay, well, you should be okay then." So, but that was the first show that I did with John Swallow, and I spent a lot of time on set there down in Santa Fe,
nice.
with Scott Frank and with John Swallow. And I actually spent a lot of time with second unit too, with a guy named Jeff Dashnaw, which is why I ended up getting into the DGA, and I'm actually doing second unit on Foundation now. So nice. But yeah, that was kind of that was very eye opening. That was being on Crimson Peak was one thing, but being on Godless with Scott and with that group of people, with Casey Silver and Mike Malone and those guys, it was a huge experience for me, and was like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Right.
And this is where I want to spend my time. So, and that's what ended up happening. And then I ended up doing American Gods and Highwaymen, and then now Foundation. So
amazing.
But yeah,
amazing. So let's talk a little bit about Foundation. Like, when you got into this project, what were some of the things? I mean, did you know much about the books or about any of that stuff before you got into it?
I knew about the books. I knew that we were starting. I hadn't read them. I'm not going to lie about that. So I read the book. I read the first book on my way to my interview at Skydance, and I was like, "Oh shit, we're going to make a show about white men talking in space with sideburns, about nuclear fission and organic tobacco." Right. in a phonetic Kentucky accent, and then they sent me the first script, and I was like, okay, no, that's not what we're doing. This is much more exciting than that. Right. Just with the space elevator and the tether fall and all of that, and then I basically went for the interview. It was right after the premiere of season 2 of American Gods in Hollywood. So I went in and, I'd had some fun the night before, wasn't expecting anything. Got a call back from them, said, yeah, we'll hook you up with David Goyer. David and I had a Zoom. I was the third person David had talked to. The other two people, I won't name them, but said that the show was too crazy and could never get done. My whole deal was, we shoot as much, get as much in camera so we can spend the money on the big stuff, and we tried to do that as much as possible, and it worked to a certain extent. And that's kind of the mantra that we've carried forward with all of this, into season 3. But the rest is kind of history. We landed in. They hired me in March. We were in Iceland by, I think, late April, May, and they had. The original production designer, I think he went to go do Snake Eyes. And then I knew Rory Shane from American Gods was available, so his name got brought in the loop, and he got hired. So it was, him and I and David Goyer and Michael Malone flying around Iceland looking for locations, and Malta and the Canary Islands and Ireland, and it just moved very quickly after that, and that's kind of how that all transpired.
I worked on Oblivion, and like those Iceland plates are like perfect for a lot of site material.
yeah except we scouted in June and went back to shoot in November.
Oh no.
Which,
very dark.
Productions, it seems like they always scout in optimal weather, and then they shoot at the worst time possible.
Right.
It's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, we had sets blow off mountains. We had at one point we actually had to leave Iceland, and we moved all of Terminus to the Canary Islands, because where we had set up and where we had wanted to shoot it, we had found unexploded ordinance from when the army was there during Desert Storm practicing. So there was a couple unexploded tank shells that we found in the field where we were shooting the vault. And
wow.
So that's there's video on somebody's phone of us exploding, of the demolition people exploding that, but it was pretty wild. And then the Canaries was great. It was very, it was as volcanic as Iceland without the weather problems.
Right.
A lot more dusty, but yeah, we were able to kind of use that volcanic landscape in the same way. So it was really good. It was a serendipitous shift.
How have you noticed the change of the scope or the things that you've been doing over? This is your third season, right, on the show. So how have you seen the evolution of that scope as you've been moving along?
Well, it's just getting. The season 1 was a huge world building task. Mm-hmm. It was a feat of the imagination to come up with that. World of Foundation, the Cleons and Trantor and Terminus and all of that. And then, season 2 went a little more wild. Season 1, I kind of say is like our, it's like our acid rocks phase. And then season 2 was our kind of punk rock phase. Everything got a lot faster and a lot more choppy. And we were kind of tripping over ourselves a little bit to get things done, but the stories turned out better. The character development was better. Mm-hmm. I can't say much about season 3, but yeah, season 2. Season 2 was definitely crazier. There was a lot more. We had. I keep telling everybody we have every type of visual effect you can imagine on the show. So right. It all becomes very. Very integrated with what the directors want to do and how they want to shoot, and then reminding them of the rules that we've set up to make sure that we don't have to make up holograms of convenience, or all of these things that we do just to kind of make the plot along with sci-fi MacGuffins. So I'm sure we try to keep them away from using that stuff too much. And again, also just to kind of focus our efforts on the big sequences and the places where it actually pays off to spend the money, and not have 500 wig fixes or set extensions on a set that when they're shooting off of it, or things like that. So that's really the in terms of scope, though. We're definitely expanding it as every year or every season, because unfortunately, because of COVID, SAG strikes and WGA strikes, it seems like it takes like 2 years to do a season of Foundations.
Right.
It's we're hoping that there's no more things get tossed our way now, but.
Well, we definitely seem to be on the upswing now at this point in terms of where that's going, which is great. What are some of the big, besides those specific production challenges, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've thought in terms of the visual effects on these shows? I guess you can't talk about season 3 that much, but season 2, for example.
Season 2, it's because we're a location show and not a studio show. Mm-hmm. It's getting everybody to buy into the lack of ability to put up blue screens and put up green screens. Everybody who, from directors to grips to cameramen, that's kind of been a crutch for them over the last 20 some odd years. But people don't really pull keys anymore. I know that everybody on social media, freaks out when they turn the screens gray or blue or whatever, but or sort of blue screen gray, or they look at what Paul Lambert's been doing on Dune with the sand screens and things like that. But with the resolution we're getting out of the cameras, and the roto technology and what everybody's doing right now, it's actually it's less useful and actually more cumbersome for us to move as quickly as we need to put those screens up. Unless there's a lot of visual noise behind what we're shooting and what we want to key. We tend to only use them in those circumstances, and also. We also use a lot of atmosphere, which most people shy away from. But it actually, when you get that you almost get a natural depth cueing from that atmosphere that helps with the roto and helps with the separation. It's definitely that's something that has been difficult, not difficult, but interesting to see people try to change their view on that a little bit, and also depending on where you are, that stuff can be expensive, prohibitively expensive to put up.
Right.
But it's not something that we necessarily use a lot of. And also, we have a lot of blue and green costumes. So,
for sure. Yeah. What are your thoughts on in-camera visual effects?
Like LED walls and
LED walls, or real-time compositing, or any kind of real-time stuff.
It's virtual production on set. Definitely helps everybody understand what we're doing. I use some augmented reality to show directors where ships are, where the vault is, things like that, because they often think that it's smaller than it is, or they don't frame it the right way, or something like that. So the AR has definitely become very helpful. We do a lot of not necessarily previs compositing or anything like that, but we do have a video switcher that we use for our composites when we're doing separate passes and things like that. And we did do some volume work on season 1, a little bit on season 2, it's a great tool for actors and for capturing out of focus backgrounds, but when you focus on them, unfortunately they moire and the color shift and the
right.
The shift doesn't help us out that much, but there were a couple sequences. There's a sequence in season 1, I think it was episode 2, where Raish and Gail were sitting on a rock, and we had shot a time lapse of Hecla that we brought back to the studio and put up an LED wall and shot it all against that. So that worked out really well. And I understand, and it was good because they were actually in a simulator where they had to rewind the sunset, so we could actually do that on camera, and they could see it and they could react to it, which was great. But yeah, no, I think there's as technology develops and as it gets easier, there's no reason not to use it, as long as it's not cost prohibitive.
Right.
Because it does become, you have to convince producers and convince everybody that, there's a different pipeline you need to build for this. You have to give us 6-8 months of lead time to be able to build
get our assets ready.
And, yep. all of that sort of thing. And for a producer, it's kind of scary sometimes if they haven't done it before. And, there's not very many people who have done it before. Mm-hmm. So at this point, it's kind of a, with the LED screens anyways, in the volumes, it's a newish situation for anybody outside of commercials or Lucasfilm.
Right.
I forget the name of the Netflix show that used it for the boat.
Right. I can't remember.
Yeah. It's like $18.99 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's useful, but it can also be cumbersome in the wrong hands.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating that, that there's been this process and this shift, and you might have noticed it over the years as well, that there's been this conversation about visual effects that sort of had this up and down period, right? I mean, where there's been people that, I call it the pinnacle was the Life of Pi days, where people were really kind of coming down on visual effects and the technology were used. And now I think it's interesting as well that we're back to that point where people are pretending that there's no visual effects being used in films when it clearly is. And it seems to be a marketing decision for studios to say this was all done for real, right? And sort of diminishing all the work that we do in collaboration with the actual filmmakers in a lot of ways. So it's what do you think about that narrative that's been going on and how people are trying to correct it in the visual effects industry?
I think that we just have to keep fighting the good fight, and I'm a very loud character when it comes to trumpeting our work and trumpeting our involvement in filmmaking. And luckily David Goyer felt the same way on this show, which we were able to promote the visual effects. We were able to promote how well Rory and I work together, production design and visual effects coming together to make something look cool and make it look as real as possible and make everybody forget about the visual effects and just think, oh, this is just cool. And that is essentially our job, is for people not to go, oh, that's some CG bullshit.
Right.
They're just to go, oh, that's fucking cool. And then they carry on with the rest of the story.
Right.
And that's kind of where we need to continue to push that, because, the whole idea of, not to throw stones, but I still think Top Gun Maverick would have made $1 billion whether or not they said the planes were real.
Right. Maybe.
when they
I'm
came
not
out.
sure. I mean, a lot of people tried to believe what Tom Cruise said, right? They want to believe that Tom Cruise was actually in an airplane or jumped off a cliff or whatever. That's his marketing, right?
Yeah, but he did fly in those planes, and they did shoot the planes, but they reskinned them with CG.
Right.
I mean, he did jump off a cliff and parachute. He did that like 8 times or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to paint out the ramp and put a CG put a CG rock face in there and do all of that. So it wasn't but that is where the magic of and that's why kind of like what Chris Nolan does is he doesn't really talk about it at all. Or Denis, he kind of he just it's all part of filmmaking.
Sure.
And it's all part of the process. And we like now I'm second unit directing. I'm spending a lot of time in all these other departments with the physical production side of things, and they are just as important as the hundreds and thousands of artists after all the plates are shot and they have to do the work. But
right.
The animosity and the idea that all of the artists sitting at desks grinding out the shots for everybody shouldn't get kudos. We definitely have to get over that,
right?
As an industry, and I think it's starting. Some of it starts with the unionization movement that we've been pushing. In Canada, the DGC has picked up the flag there. IATSE has as well. Some productions you can't work on now in Canada as a on-set supervisor or a data wrangler unless you're IATSE. So we are moving in the right direction in terms of getting that sort of recognition, but or getting ourselves organized in that way. I don't think that's the recognition that we need, but I don't think we should be scared to try to make our voices heard a little bit more when it comes to the production and how we interact with the physical side of production, because it does help when we say give us our 30 seconds to get our HDR and our balls and charts. Otherwise, 6 months from now, you're going to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars having us try to noodle this into place, or go into costumes and saying, hey, make sure that you take all the logos off your clothing so that we don't have to paint that stuff out, or working with the hair and makeup people to make sure that everything works for 4K, and we're not seeing wig glue and things like that. And that's all just educating everybody, and they're so. What I found is when you're willing to work with everybody and talk to them about all of these issues that cost money and take away from what actually ends up on screen, when it comes to the spectacle, for especially on Foundation, they're grateful and they love it and they want to be collaborative that way. And it's the same as like Rory with the sets. If we can build it a foot taller and save $500,000 in set extensions or whatever it ends up being, it's like let's build it. Let's make it taller. Let's use some real fake blood and not just expect it to be a visual effect all the time. And let's not be so scared to make decisions on set that we want all this wiggle room in post, and we want to make all these choices after the fact. It's like, no, just shoot it and have the cojones to get it in camera, and then we'll it will be better, and you will be more excited by the choice that you make half the time, but or more than half the time.
I think that's the thing that I like most about in-camera visual effects, is that it is in camera, right? So that the fact is that you are getting it and you are capturing it and people are part of the process, right? And so filmmakers can see it and they're making the choices, right? They're not sitting there as like, well, I hope it looks better in 6 months, because I don't know what it looks like right now. So I think that's a nice thing.
No, that is why, like we're a location show. We shoot a lot on location.
Yep.
So we, yes, we're going to replace some of the backgrounds just because we have to, just to, add whatever sci-fi characteristic we need to add to it. But being on location, being out in the elements, being in Fortaventura for Terminus, with the wind and the sand and the dust and the heat and the cold, everybody reacts to that. It's not, you don't have to say, okay, now imagine you're doing this because this is happening. They kind of get into it, and that's what's cool about it, and that is what's cool about virtual production as well. It takes away the subjectivity that happens in post, where what if we make this 30% faster? What if we make this 30% slower? What if we animate this? I want this to go faster. And that's usually the arguments I get into are can we make the ships go faster? And I always say no, because it just makes them feel like toys.
Right.
But
yep. It's amazing how people want to push the boundaries of physics. Right. Yeah.
Well, again, we can do anything, but should we?
Yeah. I did. I was, for my past lifetime, I did a whole lot of car commercials, and we had this incredible car simulator that was just the best thing and really, really imitating. But there was the amount of times that they wanted to sort of break the boundaries of what a car could actually do. It was like, if you actually made that turn physically, you would pass out. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. But yeah. I want to get into real briefly about, obviously there's been a lot of talk in the visual effects industry, and I'm trying to get everyone's sort of view on this in terms of how AI tools are getting a lot of backlash now. You see someone using a marketing tool that suddenly is like, oh no, they used some AI something for a poster, and now everyone wants to cancel that show. Right? Like, what are your thoughts about that process and how people are reacting to this and in general with how tools are being used?
I think we have to be careful how we use them and what we use them for. I think there's exploitation to a certain degree based on the fact that they are data mining tools, a lot of them that are just combing the internet looking. That's how the internet is the best data set for training these neural nets and training these algorithms. And unfortunately, there's a lot of copyrighted material on the internet, and the way that they're coming up with these images is by looking at those images. Now, if you look at it,
we used to do that. For real. We used to just go on the internet and look at an image and say, I want it to look like that.
Yeah, and we still do.
Right.
But at a certain point, it used to be human input. So we would take that image and then we would interpret it in our own way.
Sure.
And now we've got like a Mid-Journey or something that can manifest some version of what we think it should be very quickly without any brush strokes, any vertices pulled, that sort of stuff. It's a bit daunting to think about, who, like, aside from the legalities of what it is, once we sort out the copyright issues and everything else, I think to some extent we're all going to have to embrace some form of using AI. And now, things like facial simulation and facial rigging. Thanos, they used a lot of that for that. Ziva, before they kind of got in with Unity, and they're now I think they're now exclusive to DNEG. They were using some neural nets to train their facial muscle simulation, and that I don't think that's a bad thing, because I remember how many iterations it would take.
Tell me about it.
You know, to get
Yep.
it, because it's such a subjective thing. But if you take out like you know, Thanos was pretty good.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
Like, if you look at Thanos versus now Thanos is a purple character that isn't, he's human like, he's not actually human, but you know, it's, if you look at that versus you know, Peter Sellers from Rogue One. Is it Peter Sellers?
No,
Grand Moff.
Yeah,
Grand Moff Tarkin.
But or even like, you know, having worked at DD and like, you know, saw, you know, the devolution from Clue to Thanos, right? So like if you look at Clue, right? And Clue, there was so many subjective decisions of like, I don't know, just shift it right, shift it left, maybe the eye, I don't know, something this, you know, and you're trying to figure it out. And it's so hard to do emotionally. I mean, that was the whole thing of when the Uncanny Valley. I think you're right. AI tools really, really help tamper that Uncanny Valley problem in a really interesting way, just because of the nature of the fact they can solve it more objectively as opposed to subjectively, right? Yeah,
and I mean, like I remember Ed Taylor telling me all about that. You know, that the inside scoop on Clue's head and how long that took versus, you know, how long it took to do Tron's head. Yeah. You know, and how much time was spent there. And it's just, it's crazy. It's like, and you know, and then you go back a little bit further from, you know, like, yes, that was a you know, supposed to be a perfect replica of Jeff Bridges. But then you go back further and you go to like the heyday of ILM and look at something like Pirates of the Caribbean, and how well that was executed. You know, that was really like when you're talking about the heyday of like Life of Pi, of
Benjamin
Pirates of the
Buttons
Caribbean, Benjamin Buttons, even Transformers. You know, those were insanely well done. And that was, I think that was the peak of kind of the artistry of what we were doing, and you know, and I was watching it happen because I was not at that level yet, right? But I was watching everybody else work on these crazy characters, and you know, trying to and the photorealism and you know, just the artistry that went into making some of those shots it's just mind-boggling. And then you get to, you know, things like Fast and the Furious, or even some of the newer Marvel shows, and you wonder, you know, if we're just trying to do too much sometimes.
Well, my theory is like back in those days, like it turns out the secret sauce is just hiring really good artists, and if you hire really good artists, you probably are going to be okay.
Yeah. And that's part of the problem too, is oversaturation and the needs. You know, some of the companies have gotten so big that you know, not everybody's going to be, you know, a Benjamin Button tier artist, right? And it's going to take, and they may eventually be someday, but you're never going to be able to staff every show with that caliber of artists. So. Right. And that's you know, and part of what we do on Foundation is I, you know, like we go in and we hire the people. Right. We don't hire the companies, you know. So I talk to the supervisors. I talk to, you know, we have very good rapport with the artists, and you know, we just try to make that work as opposed to, you know, the punch clock grind version of what we do, because you know, this is supposed to be fun. Sure.
Yeah, I if you're not having fun, then it's not worth it to me, honestly.
No, and if you're not learning and it's not fun, and you know, it can be frustrating at times. But if you're, you know, at the end of the day, you're like, I don't want to go to work, then you know, there's plenty of other things to do. But
awesome. Well, before we go, I'd like to, like, I know you said you can't say much on season 2, but is there something you can say, something you can look forward to, something to anticipate? When would we be able to see something?
I really can't say anything. Okay. I mean, other than the fact that, you know, we're in Prague and Poland right now shooting season 3, and nice. You know, we're gonna get it done soon. So,
when is season 3 expected to come out?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
we're still.
Oh, with
we're
all
still
the jumble
working
and the
that
strikes
out,
and
yeah.
everything, it's hard to sort of nail that down at this point, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, I honestly, this is like, just because of the weird way that the Emmys are landing and all of everything's coming out this year in terms of the timing shift. Just reminding everybody that season 2 is still out there and you can watch it, and season 1.
Yeah.
But season 2 is out there, and it's a lot of, like, Mike Enriquez and myself, and all of the teams at Rodeo, like Arnaud and Loreline at Framestore, and everybody that Outpost and Macavision or Accenture Song now.
Mm-hmm.
They all just nailed it, and I hope they had as much fun on the show as I did. Awesome. Working with those folks and just getting everything to a level that David Goyer was happy with. So that's really the gist of it. Is just trying to make this make visual effects fun again.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Because yeah, I mean, we spend so much time talking about the politics and of it all, and making sure we get our comeuppance and everybody gets jaded and cynical, and that's something we don't talk a lot about. But it's just trying to get everybody excited about what we're doing, and everybody's worried about filmmaking going away. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So.
I think we're too excited about storytelling, and there's too many tools out there to tell stories, and there's so much stuff that's happening. So it's very, very exciting. I mean, honestly, secretly, I've been waiting for a Foundation series for a long time. I've been reading those books since I was a little kid. I just didn't know how they were going to pull off 1,000 years of history in one season. but yeah.
The way that I explain it whenever anyone asks me is that what Asimov wrote was an encyclopedic version of the story of Foundation.
Right.
And what we're doing is we're looking at that encyclopedia and we're going, okay, well, let's tell we're doing a character-driven version of that.
Right.
So, and instead of the overarching view that Asimov took in the first book, and
right. Right.
But yeah, I mean, I will say that it's going to get pretty exciting.
Awesome.
Very
exciting.
Yeah.
Well, cool, Chris. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited to let people know about Foundation season 3. Obviously, we'll be waiting a bated breath for that one to come out. So, congratulations on that, and hopefully we'll be able to see it soon.
Well, thanks for inviting me on, and I had a great time. Thank you.